This week on ANN, we have an update on how the Adventist Church in Lebanon is holding up after a deadly blast hits Beirut.
Adventists in Jamaica are mourning the loss of a Northern Caribbean University professor.
And ADRA is working in the Dominican Republic after the island nation is hit by Hurricane Isaias.
These stories and more coming up.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
First in the news, as we reported last week on August the 4th, an explosion rocked the capital city of Lebanon, killing more than 130 people, wounding thousands and leaving more than 300,000 homeless.
Official news sources report that the blast originated in a facility used to store ammonium nitrate, a highly explosive chemical. All Adventist workers and members have been accounted for and are safe, but some Adventist contacts have been injured.
Leaders of the Middle East and North Africa Union, or MENA, have confirmed damage to buildings on the Middle East University campus, primarily windows blown out from the impact blast in homes, dorms, and classrooms, but also fallen ceilings. Similar damage was reported in the MENA Media Center on the university's campus.
Two Adventist secondary schools in Beirut and the ADRA office were damaged as well. Hardest hit was the Boucherie Adventist Secondary School, where crews are cleaning up debris from fallen windows and ceilings.
Two Adventist churches located on the school's campuses in Buri and Mustabeth were also affected. Glass windows and doors were shattered, and volunteers have been working carefully to clean up the debris. The Adventist Learning Center for Refugees was also heavily damaged, affecting one of the ways the church assists refugees in Lebanon.
President of the Adventist Church in Mena, Rick McEdwards, says, "Our biggest concern right now is how Adventists can assist the people of Lebanon with hope and practical help at this time. We want to show God's love to this country at a time when many have lost hope. Church workers and members are looking for ways of being God's hands and feet during this time through practical assistance in the most affected areas."
In October, dramatic protests rallied across Lebanon, eventually causing the prime minister to resign and a new government to be formed. The hope of national economic and infrastructure reforms faded as the Lebanese currency began to dive in value.
From October through December, banks, schools, and offices were frequently closed due to various protest movements bringing the country to a standstill.
Just when Lebanon was beginning to reopen for normal business, the world was hit with the COVID-19 pandemic, causing a government-mandated total lockdown with eventual stages for reopening.
The Adventist Development and Relief Agency is also working in the country by providing essential emergency supplies to recovery workers and survivors.
ADRA MENA Director Gunther Walthier said responders say they have never seen anything like this before. The images look like a war zone. The first dispatched ambulance teams were killed by the explosion. We are delivering water and essential equipment to firefighters and civil defense workers. We are providing bedding supplies so that they have a place to rest. They need cots, tents, generators for lights since electricity is out in most of the city. We know there's devastation in several neighborhoods close to the epicenter. Our teams on the ground are quickly addressing and assessing the situation to provide immediate aid to children and families.
ADRA teams will tour at least 5 neighborhoods, including schools surrounding the blast zone, to begin to deploy the humanitarian support, including water and food, to the victims.
Prayer support is greatly appreciated for the church and the institutions that have been affected by the crisis in Lebanon and the explosion. McEdward appeals, please pray for the church in Lebanon as it seeks to be a blessing and bring good news to the nation.
If you would like to help ADRA with relief efforts in Lebanon, please visit adra.org/emergency fund.
Some stories of how God was merciful have come out of Lebanon. Ronnie and Elsa Haddad have been happily married for 15 months. Both are teachers at Boucherie Adventist Secondary School in Beirut, Lebanon. Hope Channel MENA has been reaching out to the younger generation in this region through digital media. One project that was initiated recently on YouTube introduces this audience to the Adventist Church's 28 fundamental beliefs. Ronnie and Elza are the perfect candidates for this program because they both have the knowledge, energy, and millennial techniques to do the job. On August 4th, the Haddads plan to record their program in the morning at the Hope Channel Mena studio to be finished in a 2-hour session like usual. Due to a scheduling conflict for studio staff, however, the recording was postponed till 3:30 p.m. And for some reason, their typical 2-hour recording session took much longer than usual. The young couple patiently tried several recordings to provide their best shots for the program, although they knew they would miss their daily 6 o'clock routine at home, sitting together next to the big window where they could see a lovely view of the city of Beirut. Suddenly, they experienced a strange power outage in the studio, and the building shook
هو
terribly.
الزلزال؟
Elsa asked if it was an
الزلزال
earthquake, and
صار؟
Ronnie assured her that it was.
يا رب
Well, that
دخلك.
was before the
أكيد
second
يا رب
huge blast, and
دخلك.
the entire team had to stop the recording and run out of the studio. When the couple returned home, they understood why the recording was delayed. God had intervened to keep them from their usual 6 o'clock routine at home. The place where they usually sat to view the city was now covered with shattered glass as a result of the explosion and shockwave. The HC Menace studio also suffered some damages, although it is more than 3 miles away from the epicenter.
The entire Northern Caribbean University, or NCU, family and its Board of Governors is shocked as they mourn the recent passing of one of its professors. Dr. Gordon Lightbourne, an associate professor at NCU, was discovered with multiple gunshot wounds at his home in Christiana, Manchester, Jamaica, by a housekeeper on August 7. Gordon Lightbourne served as an associate professor in the biology, chemistry, and environmental science department at NCU since 2012. His expertise and work in the area of tissue culture was well known nationally, university officials said. President of NCU, Dr. Lincoln P. Edwards, expressed his deepest sympathies to Dr. Lightbourne's family. Dr. Lightbourne's tragic and untimely demise highlights the unacceptable level of crime and violence in society, even amidst the COVID 19 pandemic. We call on the authorities and all who desire to lead this nation to urgently find a solution to this great and appalling malady we call crime. Authorities in Jamaica have reported that violent crime is increasing at an alarming rate.
During the COVID 19 pandemic, more than 560 low income families received food packages and 24 families received laptops for online education, thanks to projects sponsored by the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, or ADRA, in Hungary. ADRA's Quarantine Courier project provided non perishable food, cleaning supplies, and toiletries to low income people who found themselves in crisis during the country's lockdown. ADRA recruited 32 volunteers, primarily from the Seventh day Adventist churches, to help purchase, transport, assemble, and distribute the food packages. So far, 7 communities have received emergency aid from ADRA during the pandemic. ADRA also focused on helping students continue their education despite the disruptions caused by COVID 19. In mid March, when all schools in Hungary closed and had to transition to digital education, ADRA recognized that low income students would suffer. ADRA in Hungary immediately began raising funds to purchase laptops that students could use to participate in online education. By the end of the second week of the school shutdown, ADRA had shipped refurbished laptops to schools in 3 counties. After receiving further donations of funds and equipment, ADRA was able to provide a total of 24 laptops to students in 6 communities. In many families, several children used the machine, multiplying the impact of the program. ADRA, the global humanitarian arm of the Seventh day Adventist Church, is assisting approximately 2.7 million families in more than 70 countries during the coronavirus pandemic. To help with ADRA's ongoing COVID 19 response, visit adra.org.
The Adventist Development and Relief Agency in the Dominican Republic is providing assistance to hundreds of families affected by Hurricane Isaias, which struck the island on July 30. The storm brought rains that overflowed rivers, drenching 14 provinces and affecting more than 5,500 persons and damaging 1,000 homes. Church leaders who toured the affected communities the day after Isaiah's hit said the Hato Mayor province in the southeastern region was the hardest hit. ADRA is providing 409 box spring beds to 385 of the most affected families in Hato Mayor. ADRA Dominican Republic Director Roberto Matos said each registered family will be able to collect their bed in a nearby location. The affected families have also received food and clothing. President of the Adventist Church in the Dominican Republic, Paulina Puello, reported that 159 families lost their belongings in the flooding. He said immediately after the storm, church members from the southeast region provided warm meals to hundreds of persons for 3 straight days. The union and conferences throughout the island sent in funds to assist the Adventist families and those in the affected communities as well. Several churches were flooded and will be further assessed for structural damage. Puello says, "We continue to pray for the families who, even though they lost everything, are keeping strong in the faith." The North American Division Youth and Young Adult Ministries Department, or YYAM, started their Momentum series on Tuesday evening, March 10.
This grew into weekly Sabbath programming that continues going strong through summer, with viewership in the thousands and scheduled programming through August. Starting August 1st, the No Backpacks Back to School series will feature a discussion on mental health and students.
Van Deon Griffin, Associate Director for YYAM, said, "Our office wanted to make an impact on youth leaders and teens who exemplify leadership qualities. The nightly Momentum meetings focused on what to do while home from school and work. Momentum means strength gained through progress. We wanted our leaders and teens to continue to progress even in this unique time of COVID-19.
The YYAM team decided to use the resources produced for youth Sabbath school groups when meeting on Sabbath and promote them online instead in a weekly church service.
They wanted to share with a wider audience how to use the Sabbath School materials being produced weekly and how the materials can impact the teens in their local churches as well as their leaders."
Through this process, the team learned that more people were accessing the youth website, their Facebook page, and their YouTube channel than other channels.
As they prepare for the month of August, the team hopes their Back to School series, which delves into mental health, will help teens and leaders be successful in making the unique transition into this new normal.
To watch No Backpacks Back to School series, visit facebook.com/NAD Youth Ministries. You can learn more at nadadventist.org.
Coming up, A&M In-Depth sat down with President of MENA, Rick McEdward, and Head of ADRA MENA, Gunther Waller, to talk about the recent explosion in Beirut and its impact on the Adventist Church.
We'll be right back after the break.
Welcome back.
Each week on ANN In Depth, we bring together experts from around the world to talk about one important topic a little more in depth.
This week, in a special live episode, host Sam Neves sat down with President of MENA, Rick McEdward, and Head of ADRA MENA, Gunther Waller, to talk about how the Adventist Church is doing in the face of the deadly blast last week.
The impact, though personal, is much greater on those that have been closer to the blast zone downtown, where many, and I will say with condolences to the country of Lebanon, many have lost their lives, many have been injured and lost their homes. And so in the process, we have been personally impacted, but much greater by the country and by the city of Beirut. And you go downtown Beirut right now, Sam, it is full of buildings that have no windows, where the offices have been blown through. It's the buildings that have had a lot of employees, large buildings that are completely blown through, and just behind them, many apartment buildings nearby. Gunther and I have visited several of the residential communities where many people have lost their homes.
Well, the first thought that we had is that we knew that there will be rescuers, firefighters, and civil defense in the area to search for survivors, and we know that in this moment they are working around the clock, and so we thought, let's take water for them and for other volunteers that we might find. As we went to the place, we realized that there were some blockades by the army, not letting the population to get closer. But we talked with the army. We reached the headquarters of the firefighters in a blockade, and then we talked with the firefighters. And they asked, no, you can leave here, the water we will take there. Then I said, no, we need Azada to go. And then he jumped in our car, one of the commanders, and he threw his presence in our two cars. We went to the site where the blast happened. And they were just starting to put a tent, the firefighters, and there were also rescuers teams I saw from France, and then after Poland. And then they gave us also a list of materials they needed. The next day, we managed to purchase things because on Thursday we had lockdown. Not all the shops were open. So we went back on the following day, and we could set their rest camp for them. And the second thing that we start doing is to distribute water and also some food to the population on the other side of that road that separates the port from the buildings and the homes. And now we are, of course, doing reports, proposals, we receiving donations and coordinating with other NGOs areas for us to continue distributing food and also some vouchers charged with some credit for people to buy food, or if they need to buy a pen or a tool or something to repair their home.
To watch the full episode and more episodes of ANN In Depth, visit youtube.com/AdventistORG Church.
Coming up, David Trim is here for This Week in Adventist History.
But up next, Adventist Mission shares the story of the floating church in the Amazon.
We may look, pray, read, think, worship, sing, and share differently, but we all look forward to the Sabbath, and we all look forward to the future when Jesus will come again. With this message in mind, we arrived at a core component for a new identity system: the creation grid, a simple 7-column structure for layout. The grid is a reference both to the prophetic timeline as well as to the creation week that culminated in the 7th-day Sabbath. Regardless of what or where you are designing, you can always find information to help you communicate that we are all Seventh-day Adventists.
Welcome back.
Along the Amazon River, there are whole communities with no knowledge of the Bible or Jesus.
But thanks to the past 13 Sabbath School offerings, a floating church was built.
Adventist Mission has more.
The Amazon River is a source of food and income for many. As you travel along the river, you can see many communities along the banks. Here you will find 1/4 of our planet's fresh water supply. That's why boats are necessary for transportation. There are entire communities with either no knowledge of the Bible or no churches. Adventist here found a fitting way to reach more than 10,000 communities. Thanks to your past contributions to the 13th Sabbath offering, the Floating Church was built. This custom boat is a church that carries the pastor's family. It often works alongside the Adra Luzero boats to provide health care and hope to people.
The main goal behind the Floating Church project is to reach places we typically find hard to visit. The Floating Church offers an infrastructure for a pastor or Bible worker, a captain, and others to live aboard. There's also an auditorium where people from the community can come to listen to the Word of God.
The Floating Church has an auditorium that seats 120 people. It's a comfortable space for people to come and learn about God.
I know what difficulties they face and how hard it is for the gospel message to reach the distant communities along the Amazon River. This touched me in a special way. I was moved by the prospect of this project. It was encouraging to imagine how far this boat could go to reach the riverside families.
This boat also has onboard apartments for the crew. Reno Guerra is both the pastor and the captain of the boat. He and his wife, Natalia, accepted God's call to bring hope and healing to the region.
As soon as the boat docks, it's received with a lot of joy. People are happy to see the Floating Church because it is a beautiful and unique boat. Pastor Reno sounds the horn to catch the attention of the people who come curiously to look. So the pastor invites the people to a church program. He enters a community where the work already has begun and calls the people to come inside the Floating Church. The boat is usually docked for 60 days as they talk about family, health, and community well-being.
In the first year of service, 2 new churches were established through the Floating Church. This past June, the Gutierrez Church opened as a result of the missionary project.
This is the first daughter church plant of the Floating Church project. The church that floats is the mother of all the traditional church structures that are built along the banks of the Amazon River.
Indeed, miracles are happening along the Amazon.
We noticed that this project changes what people think about God and about the Adventist Church. There is change in their society. People become calmer, happier, more content, and united. The church helps the community to realize how they can work together as one body to develop social projects for themselves.
Irmão, com certeza, muitas alegrias.
I believe many souls will be reached through this boat. This boat can reach places where even radio signals don't travel to reach hearts.
We pray that this will be managed and used well for the gospel to reach the farthest places in the Amazon.
We have the opportunity to navigate rivers and oceans as part of our mission to reach unreached people groups. Please pray for the Floating Church and the many missionaries involved in flooding the Amazon with hope. And thank you for supporting projects like these through the 13th Sabbath offering.
Watch this and other mission stories online by visiting adventistmission.org, then click on videos at the top.
And finally, for today's episode, let's turn to David Trim for a look at Adventist history.
This week, we hear the story of Sarah Bright, who reminds us we're never too old to find Jesus.
This week, we look at 2 remarkable Adventist women. On August 15 in 1789, Susan Bright was born in the U.S. state of Virginia. She lived into the 20th century, becoming the oldest Seventh-day Adventist. Born Susan Trimble, she married Jacob Bright, a veteran of the War of 1812. He died in 1861, and Susan eventually outlived all her 6 children. In 1896, at the age of 106, she joined her oldest daughter-in-law, Sarah Ann, in Topeka, Kansas, and Sarah Ann was a Seventh-day Adventist. Her mother-in-law had been baptized by immersion in 1831 and could remember the falling of the stars in 1833. Now she studied the Bible, was convicted, and aged 108, was accepted into the Topeka church by profession of faith. Nor was Sarah's Adventism nominal. You see her here in a photograph taken in 1902 when, aged 112, she attended the Kansas Conference session. Sarah Bright went to sleep in Jesus on March 10, 1903. She was 113 years old. Sarah is the proof that it is never too late to come to the truth. On August 10, 2007, Irene Morgan Kirkcaldy died. An African-American woman, Irene was born in 1917 in Baltimore, in the U.S. state of Maryland. In 1944, Irene visited her mother in Virginia, a state in the south of the United States. Returning to Maryland on a Greyhound bus, Irene was arrested for sitting in the white section. Irene appealed her conviction all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which in 1946 quashed her conviction, ruling that Virginia had no power to impose segregation on interstate bus travel. Sadly, it took into the 1960s for legal segregation within U.S. states to be dismantled. But in her case, Irene set an immensely important precedent. She died in 2007, aged 90. Irene was motivated by 2 foundational biblical principles. First, justice, proclaimed so persistently by the Old Testament prophets. And second, the principle that men and women should be treated without regard to race or ethnicity or nationality, because God created humanity and Christ died for all men and women. Irene Morgan's stand was taken independently of her church, but these are Seventh-day Adventist principles. That was this week in Adventist history.
Thanks for watching ANN. Join us next week for more news from the Global Seventh-day Adventist Church.
We'd love to hear from you. Send us your feedback and tell us how your church is making a difference in its community.
Be sure to capture plenty of video footage and photos, then write up a summary of the event's important details, and feel free to send full video reports as well.
You can reach us by sending an email to annvideo11@gmail.com.
Before we say goodbye, here's some good news. It comes from the book of 1 John chapter 4, verse 7.
The passage says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God."
And that's our program for this week. Remember, you can always visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.